The morning of the company meeting, I wore the same gray blazer I'd worn to my college graduation. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar, telling myself it didn't matter what happened in that room. I had told myself that for 11 years. I was getting pretty good at lying. My brother Daniel was already there when I arrived. Of course he was. He probably never left. He had a way of making every room feel like it belonged to him the moment he walked in. He was leaning against the conference table at Hartwell Family Holdings, laughing at something her father's attorney had said, his cufflinks catching the light. Daniel always had cufflinks. I wore a blazer from Target. I'm the younger one. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life I have been the person in my family who existed in the margins. Present enough to be useful, invisible enough to be overlooked. My brother is 41. He has our father's jaw and our mother's confidence, which is to say he was built for rooms like that one. My father, Robert Hartwell, had spent 40 years building a regional logistics company in Ohio. Not a glamorous business. Trucks, warehouses, contracts with mid-size manufacturers across the Midwest. But he was methodical and careful and honest, and by the time his health started failing 2 years ago, Hartwell Family Holdings was worth somewhere around $18 million. I had worked there since I was 24. Started in accounting because I had a finance degree and nowhere else to go after my first job fell apart. Stayed because I was good at it. Became the CFO at 29 because my father trusted my numbers more than anyone else's. I knew every invoice, every contract, every line of debt and credit in that company. I knew it better than Daniel did, and Daniel had been named president 3 years earlier, a title my mother had pushed for. My mother. I need you to understand something about her before I go any further. She is not a villain in the way that word usually works. She didn't twirl her fingers and plot my downfall. She just loved Daniel more. She always had. It was the kind of love that didn't leave room for anyone else. The kind that excuses everything and questions nothing. When Daniel made a bad call, she reframed it as bold leadership. When I flagged a financial discrepancy in his division, she called me difficult. For 11 years I had filed my reports, kept the books clean, and said nothing. The meeting had been called to discuss the transition plan. My father's cardiologist had told him in January that he needed to step back from the business entirely. Dad had spent the last 3 months working with the attorney, a man named Gerald Marsh, on restructuring the ownership and leadership of the company. We had been told, Daniel, my mother, and I, that Gerald would walk us through the plan that morning. I thought I knew what was coming. I was wrong, but not in the way I expected. My mother arrived 7 minutes late, which she always did because she believed punctuality was for people with nothing better to do. She kissed Daniel on the cheek and nodded at me the way you nod at a coat rack, acknowledging it's there, nothing more. She sat at the head of the table even though that had always been my father's chair. My father wasn't there. He'd had a procedure the week before and was recovering at home. Gerald had told us this meeting would proceed as planned. Can we get started? Daniel said. He wasn't asking Gerald. He was telling him. Gerald opened his briefcase. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of stillness that made you pay attention. He'd been handling my father's legal affairs for over 20 years. I had always liked him. He never wasted words. Your father asked me to walk you through the new structure of Hartwell Family Holdings, Gerald said. He pulled out a folder and set it on the table. He spent considerable time on this. I want you all to know that. My mother folded her hands. Of course he did. Robert is nothing if not thorough. Before I begin, Gerald said, I want to note that Robert asked me to read certain portions of this document aloud, in his words, not a summary. Daniel shifted in his chair. That's a little formal, isn't it? He was specific about it. My mother smiled her gracious smile. Then let's hear it. Gerald opened the folder. He began with the structure as it had existed. My father held 80% of the company, my mother 10%. Daniel and I each held 5%. That was the starting point. Gerald read it carefully, slowly, and I watched my mother nod along as though this was simply confirmation of something she already knew. Then Gerald turned the page. Under the revised structure, he said, Daniel Hartwell will receive a buyout of his current 5% stake, valued at $900,000, paid out over 3 years. The room went very quiet. Daniel's head turned toward Gerald slowly, like a machine changing direction. I'm sorry, a buyout? His 5% stake. Bought out. That's not. What does that mean for the president title? The president role will be eliminated in the restructure. My mother's smile had not moved, but something behind it had. Gerald, I think there's been a mistake. There's no mistake, Linda. Robert and I discussed this. Daniel was going to take over full operations. We talked about this in December. I'm aware of that conversation, Gerald said. Robert was also aware of it. He kept reading. My mother's 10% stake would be converted into a non-voting preferred share. She would receive dividends but have no operational say in the company going forward. I watched her face. I watched it the way you watch a storm front move across a flat horizon. You can see exactly what's coming. You can see the moment it decides to be serious. And Claire Hartwell, Gerald said, not looking up from the page, will receive Robert's 80% stake, along with full operational and executive authority over Hartwell Family Holdings, effective upon Robert's formal retirement. Silence. Real silence. The kind with texture. Daniel laughed first. It was a short, sharp sound. Not a real laugh. That's a joke? It is not. Dad would never. He stopped. He looked at me. I think he was expecting to see something on my face. Triumph, maybe. Satisfaction to see something on my face. Triumph, maybe. Satisfaction. I wasn't feeling either of those things. I was feeling something closer to vertigo. Claire has been the CFO for 3 years, Gerald continued, still reading my father's words. She has demonstrated a consistent understanding of this company's finances, its risks, and its values. She has done this without recognition, without adequate compensation, and without complaint. I am correcting that now. My mother's voice, when it came, was very controlled. This is not what we agreed to. You and Robert did not have a formal agreement, Linda. We have been married for 43 years. We discussed. He anticipated this conversation. Gerald reached into his briefcase and produced a second folder, thinner. He set it on the table with the same precise care he'd used for the first one. He asked me to share this as well. He opened it and turned it to face us. It was a printed email thread. I leaned forward. The dates went back 14 months. The header at the top read, Daniel Hartwell / Hartwell Family Holdings vendor accounts. My brother had been reclassifying personal expenses through a vendor account he'd set up under a subsidiary name, a landscaping company that serviced his home. A car lease for his wife. A trip to Scottsdale described as a client retreat for which no client could be identified. Over 14 months, the total came to just under $240,000. I had found the discrepancy 8 months ago. I had flagged it to my father directly, quietly, because I didn't want to blow up the family over something I wasn't completely certain about. My father had said he would handle it. I had trusted him. I had gone back to my desk and kept doing my job and said nothing to anyone. I didn't know he'd been building a file. Is that real? Daniel said. His voice had changed. It was smaller now. Your father retained a forensic accountant in November, Gerald said. The report is in the back of that folder. He didn't tell me. My mother was looking at the folder but not touching it. He didn't tell me any of this. He told Claire. She turned to me then. The look on her face is one I will carry for a long time. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was something that looked almost like recognition, the expression of someone realizing they have misread a room they thought they owned. You knew, she said. I found the discrepancy. I reported it to Dad. And you said nothing to me. I said it to him. He's the owner. I'm your mother. I didn't answer that. There wasn't a good answer, and I'd spent enough of my life trying to find one. Daniel had pushed his chair back from the table. He was looking at his hands. He was the kind of man who had never been told a hard thing without someone else in the room immediately softening it for him. And there was no one to do that now. My mother was sitting very still. Gerald was quietly organizing his papers. The $900,000 buyout, Daniel said finally. That's still on the table? It is? Gerald confirmed. Contingent on your signature on the separation agreement, which includes a clause acknowledging the expense reclassifications and waiving any future claim against the company. He's making me sign something. He's giving you an exit, Daniel. That was his word. An exit. Daniel, that was his word. An exit. My mother stood up. She stood up the way she always did everything, with composure, like her body had never once done anything without her permission. She straightened her jacket. She picked up her purse. I'd like to speak to Robert, she said to Gerald. He expected that. He asked me to tell you he's available this afternoon and that he loves you and that he hopes you'll hear him out. She nodded once. She walked to the door. She didn't say anything to me. She didn't look at Daniel either. She just left, her heels even and precise on the hardwood floor of the hallway, and then the door clicked shut and it was just the three of us. Gerald, Daniel, and me. Daniel sat there for another minute. I didn't say anything. I wasn't trying to punish him with the silence. I genuinely didn't know what to say. We had grown up in the same house. We had eaten Thanksgiving dinner together every year of our lives. He used to help me with my math homework in middle school, back before he figured out that being smart was less useful than being charming and that our mother would love him either way. Did you push for this? He asked me. No. You had to know it was coming. I had no idea. I swear to you. He looked at me for a long moment. I think he was trying to decide whether to believe me. I think maybe he did, a little. Or maybe he just didn't have the energy to fight it. Congratulations, he said, and stood up and left. Gerald and I sat alone in the conference room. Outside the window, Columbus traffic moved the way it always did, indifferent and continuous. Your father wanted you to have this as well, Gerald said, and slid a plain white envelope across the table. It was a letter, handwritten, which surprised me. My father was not a handwritten letter kind of man. He communicated in spreadsheets and firm handshakes. The handwriting was shakier than I remembered it, and that hit me in a way the meeting hadn't quite managed to. He wrote that he was sorry it had taken him this long. He wrote that he had seen what I was doing for 11 years, and he had been a coward about acknowledging it, because acknowledging it meant admitting he had let it go on. He wrote that he didn't want to die. His word, not mine. He used that word plainly and without drama, having given the wrong person the wrong thing for the wrong reasons. He wrote, "You never asked me for anything. I should have given you everything sooner." I folded the letter and put it in my blazer pocket. I sat there for a while after Gerald left. The conference table was long and dark, and I had sat at it hundreds of times and never once at the head. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. It was a regular Tuesday in March. Someone was unloading a delivery truck on the street below. A woman was walking a dog. The world had not noticed what happened in this room. I want to be honest with you about what I felt, because I think this is the part people get wrong about stories like mine. I did not feel vindicated, not right away. What I felt first was tired, the specific exhaustion of attention you've held for so long that you've forgotten it's there, until the moment it releases and your whole body registers the absence of it. I felt that. And then, underneath it, something quieter, something that might have been grief, not for the company, not for the money, but for the version of my family I had wanted it to be. For the mother who might have seen me. For the brother I remembered from middle school, before everything calcified into competition. You don't get both things, that's what nobody tells you. You don't get justice and you don't get the family you wanted. You get one or you get neither. The math doesn't leave room for both. In the weeks after, my mother and I talked twice. The first conversation was hard. She said things that were unfair, and I said things I'm not proud of, and we both hung up feeling worse. The second conversation was shorter and quieter. She didn't apologize, not directly, but she said she hoped I would run the company well. For her, I think that was close. Daniel signed the separation agreement. He took the buyout. He started a consulting business in Phoenix. I heard through a cousin that it was going reasonably well. I hope that's true. My father came into the office for the first time in 3 months on a Thursday in May. He was slower, and he needed a cane he hadn't had before. and he stood in the doorway of what was now my office and looked at the room for a moment. Then he came in and sat down, and we talked about Q2 revenue projections for 2 hours, and it was the best afternoon I'd had in years. Running a company is hard. I want to say that plainly because the story makes it sound like receiving something is the same as winning something, and it's not. I have made mistakes. I've had to let people go who didn't deserve it, and fight for people the board didn't understand, and make calls at 11 at night that I wasn't sure about. I work more than I sleep some weeks. But here's what I have learned, and it's not complicated enough to be interesting, but it's the truest thing I know. Being overlooked for a long time does something to you that being recognized can't fully undo. There is a voice that stays in you. It asks even now whether you deserve the chair you're sitting in, whether the room you just walked into actually belongs to you. I have learned to answer it. Not loudly, not every time, but I answer it. I look at the numbers. I know better than anyone in that building. I remember the 11 years I spent in the margins making sure everything held together, and I tell the voice, I was here the whole time. You just weren't looking. There's a quote I've been thinking about lately. I don't know who said it first, and I'm not going to claim I came to it easily or that it arrived in some clean moment of clarity. It came to me at 2 in the morning during a cash flow crisis in August, which is not a cinematic setting for an epiphany, but it's the honest one. The people who will fight hardest for your worth are not always the ones who share your last name. Sometimes they are. Sometimes you get lucky that way. But when you don't, when the room is full of people who have decided without evidence what you're worth, you don't have to accept the appraisal. You can stay quiet and do the work and know what you know. And one day, the folder opens. I didn't plan for that morning in the conference room. I didn't engineer it. My father did, alone, from a hospital bed in January, because he finally decided to be honest about what he'd watched for 11 years. I had nothing to do with the timing. I had everything to do with the reason. That distinction matters to me. I want to be clear that I am not telling you this story because I am the hero of it. I am telling you this story because I was the person who stayed when leaving would have been easier. Who filed the report when looking away would have been simpler. Who wore the gray blazer from Target to a meeting that would change her life and didn't know it would, and would have worn it anyway. If you are in a room right now where you are being underestimated, I know that room. I know how long the table feels and how loud other people's certainty can be. I know how easy it is to mistake someone else's confidence in the wrong person for evidence that you are wrong about yourself. You are probably not wrong about yourself. Stay. Do the work. Keep the receipts. The folder always opens eventually. I've thought a lot about what it actually means to be patient. Not the greeting card version of it, where patience is soft and noble and rewarded quickly. The real kind. The kind where you sit in a room for 11 years and watch someone else take credit for the stability you built. And you don't say anything, not because you're weak, but because you understand that timing is its own form of intelligence. I was not a saint in this story. I want to say that clearly. There were mornings I resented my father for not seeing what was in front of him. There were meetings where I sat across from Daniel and felt something bitter move through me that I'm not proud of. Staying quiet is not the same as being at peace. I was not at peace. I was just deliberate. What I've come to understand about cause and effect, the real, human, non-mystical version of it, is that the choices we make accumulate. Not dramatically, not in ways you can track on a calendar. They accumulate the way interest does, quietly and consistently, until one day the number on the page surprises you. Daniel made a different set of choices. He chose convenience over integrity, repeatedly, in small enough increments that he probably told himself it didn't count. A landscaping bill here, a car lease there. The math felt manageable, I'm sure, right up until Gerald laid it flat on the table. That is how consequences usually arrive. Not loudly. Not in the moment you'd expect. They arrive in a conference room on a Tuesday in March, in a folder you didn't know existed. My father made choices too. For years he made the choice that was easiest, which was to let my mother's certainty about Daniel fill the space where his own judgment should have been. I don't say that to condemn him. I say it because I watched him correct it, slowly and deliberately, from a hospital bed in January, and I think that took more courage than most people will ever have to show. Admitting you've been wrong about something for a decade is not a small thing. He did it anyway. That matters. What I want to say to you, and I mean this in the plainest way I can, is that the three things that actually moved my life forward were not talent, and not luck, and not the right last name. They were honesty, the discipline to keep doing the work when no one was watching, and the patience to trust that what is real will eventually be visible. Claire didn't win because the universe decided she deserved it. Claire kept accurate books because accuracy was right. Claire reported what she found, because silence in the face of dishonesty is its own kind of participation. And Claire's father, in the end, looked at 11 years of evidence and made an honest call. That's the whole story. It's not magic. It's just what happens, eventually, when one person refuses to become what the room expects them to be. The folder opens. Not always on your timeline, not always without cost. But it opens.